Let's take a closer look at Clause 6.102, which is titled Information Security Risk Assessment. But first, a very important clarification. There are two clauses in the standard with the exact same title. This is Clause 6.102 and Clause 8.2. They are both titled Information Security Risk Assessment. Now, that can be confusing, but the difference is actually quite logical. Clause 6.102 is about planning. This is where you define the risk assessment process. You describe how you'll identify risks, how you analyze them, and how you evaluate them. Clause 8.2 is about the execution of the defined risk assessment process. And this takes us to the requirements of Clause 6.102. As an organization, you have to define and document an information security risk assessment process. So in simple terms, 6.102 is about deciding how you'll do it, and 8.2 is about actually doing it. Now, the requirements of this clause directly relate to the highlighted tasks in our project plan. Now, if you have a look at the project plan, then you'll see that in the very beginning you are supposed to determine risk evaluation and risk acceptance criteria, followed by a risk assessment process. Now, you'll notice that at the very bottom of our project plan in tasks 69 and 70, I have proposed to come up with a risk management policy. Now, that is by no means mandatory or required by the standard. However, in many organizations, you have to somewhere document your acceptance criteria, your evaluation criteria, and your general approach towards the risk assessment process. And quite often, this is done in a risk management policy, in a risk management procedure, or even in a process chart if you have that. So it's a little bit up to the organization to do so. And it's not required by the standard. They just talk about a process. But a process is also something that has to be put somewhere, like that has to be written down somewhere. And that's why I made a suggestion here towards adding a policy. Now, if we look at the risk management process that you should be already familiar with, then, well, this is a process. This is a flowchart in the BPMN notation. This is one way of documenting the process, but we need to have the evaluation criteria and the acceptance criteria as well, and maybe a description about who does what and when. And that's where these charts get to their limit. So most of the time you have a process that is defined, but that is included in a document. And so this is like the whole idea behind having a risk management policy. Nevertheless, risk assessments include 3 steps, and this must be laid out in your process in whatever form it is documented. And these 3 steps are the risk identification, the risk analysis, and the risk evaluation. Now, risk identification is always the very first step. Without identifying risks, we cannot analyze and evaluate them. So, and this takes us back to our overview chart about risk management. As you might recall, a risk is when a threat is able to exploit a vulnerability of an asset, and this, let's say, exploitation leads to a disruption of business operations. In other words, a risk is a possible event that can cause harm. So it's a possible event, so we don't know if it's going to happen, but it is for sure possible that it could be happen. And so this is about risk identification now. We have to identify these events, these possible scenarios that could lead to harm in our organization. So during the risk identification, we have to try to determine possible adverse events that can harm their security objectives. So organizations need to identify their assets, vulnerabilities, already existing controls, and the current threat landscape. Now, with this information, risks and the associated negative consequences and the corresponding impacts can be determined. Now, let's take a closer look at an example. Imagine there's an organization situated on Hawaii, and it operates a data center. A data center is undoubtedly an asset, not just in terms of information security, but also financially. However, it's important to protect the data within the data center in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability if you look at it from the ISO 27001 perspective. Now, what about possible threats? Since Hawaii is located on an island with volcanic activity, it's safe to say that a volcanic eruption is a significant threat. But what about existing controls? Now, we haven't discussed controls yet, but they're measures that modify risks. For instance, a front door is a physical control that protects a data center from intruders. However, a door cannot protect you from a volcano. I think that's pretty clear. And lastly, let's talk about vulnerabilities. In the case of the data center and volcanoes, the critical vulnerability is the location of the island in Hawaii. The data center is within the critical radius of a volcano, which means that the volcano, considered a threat, can exploit the data center's vulnerability, which is the predisposing condition, in other words, a location near or next to a volcano, and thus it creates a risk. Now, the potential impact on your organization could be critical, of course, as maybe all business services would be disrupted. This is, I think, the main issue with risks. Like, if there is no critical impact or it doesn't cause any harm, then there is no risk at the same time. All right, and this takes us back to our overview chart. And now we can see that we have a threat source, which is the volcano, a non-adversarial threat. We have a volcano eruption, which is the threat event. The weakness is the predisposing condition, which is the location. And the asset is the data center, the IT services that are powered by this data center. And the compromise, well, that's obviously the disruption to business services, whatever is done or run by the data center. All right. Now, a critical requirement of ISO 27001 is assigning a risk owner to every identified risk. Now, who is this? It's the person or entity with the accountability and authority to manage the risk. This is usually not the IT team. If the risk is, let's say, loss of sales data, then the owner is likely the head of the sales department because they're the ones who suffer if the data is lost. And they have the budget to authorize a fix. Now, common owners include top management, so your CEO or your senior management. Maybe the department heads, or even asset owners. So all of those could be, let's say, the people that have the responsibility and the authority to manage the risk. Nevertheless, make sure that every identified risk has a name attached to it. Okay, this is very important. Now, once identified, we move to risk analysis. This is where we determine the level of risk. And that's the second phase of our risk assessment process. Now, the goal of risk analysis is to determine the level of risk. Risk levels are determined by analyzing the impact or the consequences and the probability of a risk to materialize. There are two types of analysis methodologies: qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis. We'll cover qualitative risk analysis first. Now, according to ISO 27005, qualitative risk analysis uses a scale of qualifying attributes to describe the impact and the probability that negative consequences will occur. Qualitative analyses are easy to understand, but they are very subjective in terms of evaluation. Now, in this example, you can see a risk matrix consisting of two dimensions: impact and likelihood or probability. Each dimension has a scale indicating the severity of the impact and the likelihood of the risk to materialize. Now, in this example, the impact has the following levels: very low, minor, moderate, significant, and extreme. The likelihood can be classified as very unlikely, rare, unlikely, likely, and very likely. Now, each combination of impact and probability represents a certain level of risk. In this example, we have 4 levels of risk: low, medium, high, and very high. Impact and likelihood are the risk evaluation criteria that help us to determine the corresponding risk levels. Since it is qualitative, it is not really based on numbers or something quantifiable. It is something that comes from your gut. If you look at the course resources, then you find a few suggestions of, let's say, possible evaluation criteria. Now, let's try to use this matrix to determine the level of risk for the volcano eruption on Hawaii. Here, we're using a semi-qualitative scale by adding numbers to our 2 dimensions. So we'll simply add numbers 1 to 5 for each dimension, and by multiplying them, we get to the risk level in the middle. Now, in the case of the volcano scenario, the corresponding level of risk is high. That's what I assume. This is highly subjective, as no further guidance here is given to you on how to determine the probability and impact of a risk. But this is, of course, up to you to decide. Here in this example, we say that the impact is extreme. I mean, of course, if the data center was gone, then that's obviously a big issue. And the likelihood is rare. I mean, that's probably debatable. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of that approach, but that's just how it's laid out in the ISO 27001 standard. The impact is something that is very easy to quantify. And I mean, we all have an idea that if that happens, then this would be the consequences. Whereas, well, what about the likelihood? I mean, we're next to a volcano. I mean, does it matter if it happens now or in 2 days or in 2 weeks? I think we should prepare for it, but that's just this approach. So it's rare. It's not something that's probably going to happen very often, but it can happen. And if it happens, it has catastrophic impact. Okay, now let's look at quantitative analysis. In quantitative risk analysis, organizations attempt to determine the actual costs and probabilities of risks. This methodology provides more specific information and allows for quantifiable decisions. However, please note that the results of this approach should be considered as estimates rather than exact figures, although the final results can be very close to reality. Now, the asset value represents the replacement value for the asset. The exposure factor is the financial loss that results from the realization of a risk, expressed as a percentage. The single loss expectancy, the SLE, is calculated by multiplying the asset value with the exposure factor, representing the financial loss for each occurrence of the risk. Now, the annualized rate of occurrence describes the probability of the risk and is usually expressed as the number of times per year. Finally, the annualized loss expectancy is the single loss expectancy multiplied by the annualized rate of occurrence. Now let's analyze our volcano risk with this methodology as well. For the sake of simplicity, we'll assume the value of the data center is $1 million. If the data center is hit by a volcano eruption, then there would be nothing left of it. Therefore, we set the exposure factor to 100%. The single loss expectancy, which is described as the product of asset value and exposure factor, is $1 million as well. This means that every time the volcano erupts and hits the data center, the entire asset value is destroyed. Now, the probability of the risk expressed as the annual rate of occurrence is hard to determine. Based on speculation, we'll set the ARO to 1 occurrence in 1,000 years. Finally, the annualized loss expectancy is equal to $1,000, which is calculated by multiplying the single loss expectancy with the annual rate of occurrence. The third and final step is risk evaluation. Here we compare the results of our analysis against our risk acceptance criteria. Now, organizations want to reduce their exposure. That's why identified risks need to be treated unless they are already within their risk acceptance criteria. In this example, an organization has determined that the following levels of risk are acceptable. This includes all low and medium risks. By consequence, all risks exceeding these criteria have to be treated until their level of risk has been reduced to a more acceptable level of risk. So this is here. We have to move the risks to the, let's say, acceptable risk levels. Now, the volcano risk was classified as a high risk, which is why it cannot be accepted. The risk level of our volcano risk can be reduced by risk treatment. Now, the probability of the risk is already quite low, whereas the impact is very, very high. So that means we can either reduce the impact and/or reduce the probability of the risk to materialize. Now, we don't have a lot of impact on volcano activity, so probably we cannot really do something about the likelihood of occurrence. But the impact of a volcano reduction can be reduced by relocating the data center, signing an insurance, or establishing backup sites, to name just a few possible controls. And by doing so, we can reduce the impact and thus shifting our risk towards the acceptable risk levels. And if that's done, then the risk is properly treated, right? And this is our job now in the risk evaluation part, to compare the risk levels with our risk acceptance criteria and to let's say, sort or give a hierarchy to the risks and prioritize them for the risk treatment, which is the next phase, the next process that we have to define in order to, well, get our risks treated and help our organizations become more secure. All right, this takes us back to the risk management process. We've just covered the risk assessment process, which consists of 3 phases: risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. Now, the results of the risk assessments will serve as input for the risk treatment process, which will follow in the next lecture.